Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by Jordan Scott. How's it going, Jordan?
Pretty good, JJ. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for wanting to come on. If you want to first mention about or if you just want to talk more about yourself so the people that are listening can somewhat know, if you can just introduce yourself and all that good stuff.
Thanks. So I started something about 2 years ago, a foul ball safety initiative. I started writing letters, and about a year ago, I put together a website about called Foul Ball Safety Now, and it's a collection of stories. I've obtained some earned media, some really interesting articles, LA Times, People Magazine, Boston Globe. The issue of foul balls is clearly an issue that has not been addressed by Major League Baseball and minor league baseball for over 100 years. And as much as they may say certain things that they're doing nets or they're putting more nets in, or it's up to us to pay attention to the game, unfortunately, there's still serious injuries that are happening all the time. And happy to get into that with you all. It's been quite a journey. The website is called foulballsafetynow.com. People who've been injured by foul balls from 40 years ago to the present time have been finding me. A lot of these families and a lot of these people are very bitter towards baseball because they've been seriously injured. They never really got a full acknowledgement from baseball when it comes to like apologies or medical bills paid for. They're not even watching baseball anymore. And as adults, they don't even want their new children playing baseball or watching baseball. So it's being passed down from generation to generation. NBC reported a couple of years ago, they had a big report which covered from 2012 to 2019, which implied about 800 injuries over 7 or 8 seasons. But that was only from 4 out of the 30 major league teams that participated in the study. It was independent contractors that work as first aid companies for these particular teams. The LA Times then reported they thought maybe with all the teams, if they participated in the study, possibly 4,500. On my website at Foul Ball Safety Now, I say 5,000 injuries from 2012 to 2019. And that suggests, not a good report for sure. So, and that's not even counting the minor leagues where there's 3 times as many more games. So I could keep going, JJ, but I figured you could throw a question or two in on that.
Yeah, that's crazy. To be honest with you, I don't think much about the foul ball and about how much it affects people. But if you were, what you were just talking about is crazy. I didn't actually know that report. And what do you think the first thing Major League Baseball and the whole baseball system, what do you think they actually need to do in order to limit this?
Sure. So I think at this stage of the game, baseball's been dishonest with their public. They knew since 1970 it wasn't a matter of if, but when some serious injury would occur. A 14-year-old young man died at Dodger Stadium in 1970 from a foul ball. But he was behind the first base dugout area. And unfortunately, baseball hasn't been honest with us. And they know that it's not a matter of if, but when. And most families don't have these clues. They know that there's a chance of catching a foul ball, but they look at it as a good time and having fun. But, as we all know, the little girl who got hurt in Houston 2 years ago off the bat of Albert Almora, she was hurt past end of dugouts. I found out from doing a survey calling nearly 100 minor league ballparks 3-4 months ago when the season began, that at least 42 of the ballparks still did not have netting past end of dugouts. And that little girl was slammed past end of dugouts. And certainly there's been no proactive initiative. The regulatory agencies, to answer your question, JJ, the regulatory agencies need to come in with their architects and engineers to all 120 minor league ballparks and all 30 major league ballparks to tell us where the nets need to go, how high, how far, how wide. And all ballparks need to eventually have a sign in it that says, it needs to have the sign yesterday, but it's not happening so fast, that these ballparks were inspected by the Independent Netting Council, which was part of some regulatory agency that certifies this ballpark as maiming free. And once we know going forward that nobody's going to have 7 stitches and a black eye or worse, which, the 7 stitches and a black eye just happened a few weeks ago in San Francisco, off of that of Justin Turner. The minor leagues, unfortunately, less media, so it's hard to document all these cases. But like I said, if the LA Times took the NBC report and came up with 4,500 injuries, on my website I said 5,000 injuries from 2012 to 2019, which doesn't even include the minor leagues. What are we talking about? There's 3 times as many more games in the minor leagues, which there were at the time. There were 2,400 major league games a year. In normal seasons, and there was 9,000 games in the minor league that season. Now we're reduced a little bit from 160 minor league clubs to 120, but still, I found at least 42 still did not have netting over the dugout. In Peoria, Illinois, which I actually rented an airplane to make a statement, they didn't even have netting over the dugout during the games early in the season. They said their nets were on order. I mean, what landlord could get away with knowing that their bricks are loose and they're waiting for the cement to arrive overseas, and that only every week or two a brick will come down? Because the last time we had a full major league season in 2019, there was somebody who reported from on Major League Baseball. Kelsey McKenney from Deadspin said 15 people were maimed in a 26 and 1/2 week season on the major league level, and she documents all those injuries. And so how many were maimed on the minor leagues? Possibly 40. I don't have those records. I also have from 2008 to 2019, 43 children maimed, mostly head injuries. Children from 2008 from 2008 to 2019. And those 43 accounted for mostly major leagues, but I do believe possibly it could be 2 to 3 times as more injuries on the minor leagues because they're just not counted, or there's less media, and the netting conditions are always lacking in the minors, and probably fall short to any standards. So I should take a break, JJ, and let you ask me some questions so I can keep going.
You're fine. That was actually, I didn't realize how many, how bad it really is. And I know the NHL does this, and probably you're probably saying more if the MLB and just all baseball in general should add some type of net all around the stadium. But I know the NHL, when they do theirs, they put plexiglass around the whole arena or whatever. But do you think eventually, or do you think the MLB should just put a bunch of nets around, or maybe plexiglass, or what do you think would be a better option for Major League Baseball and just baseball parks in general?
Sure. So there was also a second death at Dodger Stadium in 2018, a 79-year-old woman who was celebrating her birthday and anniversary. And she was hit with a ball behind home plate going 93 miles per hour up in a Lowe's section. And those major league ballparks, balls fly behind home plate. So the Dodgers took 1 year. It took 1 year from about the time she was killed to elevate the net, go up vertically behind home plate. Now, did the other 29 out of 30 teams do something similar? Because I remember going to games at Shea Stadium in New York when I would sit in the loge and the balls would come shooting back at you. So don't know if that exists at all the other 29 ballparks. The public is really not demanding it, netting, because if you look at the websites and the seating charts on my website at foulballsafetynow.com, I did a major league report and a minor league report. And all I really did was, it wasn't a 6-month study. It was me making calls to local box offices, to the 30 major league clubs and the 120 minor league clubs, in which I was fortunate to connect with nearly 100, which I have mentioned. 42 still had no netting over the dugout, and Peoria didn't even have, past the end of the dugout. And in Peoria, they didn't even have netting over the dugout. And if you go to my website, I have a video of before nets were put over the dugouts, like in 2014, 2015, there was a ball that goes in between 2 guys. And if that had connected with one of those guys, because it was right off the bat, the camera camera had it, directly off the bat and right between the guys in slow motion. And if that had connected with one of those folks, they would have had some serious problems. I think that would have been the end of baseball in Tampa Bay that year. But unfortunately, we're a reactionary society. We're in baseball. We're not a preventive society. And in Japan, it's a different culture. They have, it's respect and dignity for their fan, and they have a whole culture centered around foul balls, about communication and allowing consenting adults to sit in certain excitement seats with gloves and nets. I doubt they allow children in those sections, but if you want to flirt with danger, they will give you a glove, they will give you a helmet, and they'll say, go ahead, go sit down there. I don't think, like I said, you can bring your kid. Now, what gives us the discretion to allow our kids to sit in these hot spots? It was another reminder in 2021 of something getting crushed on video. You can all Google 2021 Arizona beer can foul ball. And it was the beer can that time. It wasn't the person. Also past the end of the dugouts. I've identified at least 42 sources in minor leagues. No netting past the dugouts. In Japan, it's a totally different environment. Their nets are much higher, and they also have people who are like attendants who are like blowing whistles when the balls do potentially come over the net to tell you. They even show animation. Some may say distasteful, but maybe it also reminds us that the message is strong. An animation of fans getting carted off in ambulances to show that you can get really hurt by a foul ball. So paying attention and staring without blinking for 3 hours is not going to do it. And watching your kid when they see and having signs are not going to prevent ricochets of 100 miles per hour going into the seats of hurting you or your kids. You're not capable of protecting your kids. And when baseball says things like, oh, our season ticket holders are calling us and they say they don't want nets, and they've been saying that, that's actually dishonest because they know the truth. When Bud Selick gave the keys over to Rob Manfred, he made sure that Manfred, he says, you're an attorney, you make sure that door stays shut. And that door is all the data that baseball knows is a matter of not if, but when these injuries will continue. And nobody's ever seen that data. It's never gone into court. Anytime anyone has gone to court or has had an issue with a foul ball injury, usually they don't make it out of their lawyer's office because of that disclaimer on the back of the ticket, or now the e-ticket, that says we're not responsible. So the lawyer says you have no case. And then sometimes it gets to the early proceedings in the case, in the court, and then the judge says, sorry, guys, can't help you. The plaintiff loses, that it gets thrown out. And then once in a while, there's a plaintiff that makes some headway, like they are in Illinois right now, hopefully making some good progress in the courts. That's when baseball gets nervous. Because if the judge says we need to see what's behind that door at MLB headquarters, then MLB will make a settlement. MLB doesn't want that data, all those files spilling out, because then it'll expose that every time baseball said, oh, the fans are calling us and we don't want nets, or, oh, it's your responsibility to watch your kids. They'll be like, oh no, now the regulatory agencies are going to be like all over us. And they'll say, well, if we knew this 50 years ago, we would have been all over you 50 years ago. And we would have told you where the nets need to go. So, similar to like what seatbelts happened like in the 1970s, when they kind of said, sorry, parents, it's no longer your discretion whether your kids could roll around the back anymore. They have to be in the belts. So that's one example for you. So chime in, JJ.
Okay, so what I got from the whole thing is basically the MLB won't do anything until until more people make a stink about it, and eventually, as eventually the MLB once. So what I get from the interview is, or get one for what you're saying is basically once the people start talking more about it and start making a fuss about it, then the MLB will finally listen. But when do you actually think Major League Baseball will actually listen to the fans? And do you think it'll be like 10, 15 years, maybe sooner? I mean, how long do you think until they finally put protection around stadiums?
Right. So it's been piecemeal, right? And but
Hmm.
there's no science behind it. If you speak to a netting installation company that installs nets, let's say in minor league ballparks, for some reason, with two ballparks with very similar dimensions, one they'll do netting that goes to the end of the dugout and not further down. And another place they may go all the way down to the foul pole where it's a better situation for the fan. So that may, the netting guy is probably wondering why they don't want me to do it all the way down to the foul pole. Like I said, it's really up to an independent netting council of like architects and engineers to go into all the 150 major league and minor league ballparks that are part of MLB. MLB pays the salaries of these minor league affiliates.
Hmm.
So the Peoria Chiefs, who hosted games earlier this year with no nets, even they were the worst of the worst. They had no nets at all starting the season above the dugout. And a couple of weeks into the season, I rented an airplane and flew a plane over there, which is also at the website, Foul Ball Safety Now. You could see the video of the plane flying over. We need independent netting counsel, which is part of a regulatory agency that tells us where the nets need to go. And if they want to have a debate or a forum, or they want to push back and say, no, those are too strict, we should still allow fans to sit here or there. Well, fine. At least we could have some sort of summit or some sort of roundtable, and there could be a debate, but there's been no debate. And it's only the fans that have been really rudely hurt that express this. And most fans are still perceiving baseball with, good with foul balls with good times. Now I have a survey on my website, and how many people they surveyed. 78% of people, when asked, maybe they thought about the question, do you are you in favor of extended netting? And 78% of the fans seem to have been. But when you go on social media, I also have a very, very good 5-minute video that everyone should see. It's an ESPN production, and I really thought they did a great job. It was parallel to what I'm trying to do, in line what I'm trying to do to get the message out. They did a 5-minute video segment, and that was about 2 years ago, and it had a lot amazing views and amazing comments, or a lot of comments, 4,300 comments, 750,000 views. But what happens is they didn't continue promoting it. So it goes into the mothballs. Nobody sees it anymore. So I actually been spending money and putting it on my own social media and putting it on, out there so people can see it, because I feel it's important. ESPN might have gotten a call from MLB and said, all right, you did what you did, but don't promote it anymore. And they probably said yes. And the reason why is they're compromised because they have a huge contract with MLB. So I believe they received flack for doing a reasonably good job in informing fans. But like anything else, if you're not going to continue promoting it, it falls away. So obviously, in the last year and a half, there were no comments, right? So it's like, whoa, it went from 4,300 comments to zero because nobody was promoting it. So I'm spending money on social media and other places to make sure that people see this video. Even if ESPN doesn't want me to do it, I'm doing it anyhow. It's important.
Okay. Yeah, and it seems like netting is the most logical idea. Or but what do you think there should be something else besides netting, or do you just think it should be netting all around the baseball stadiums?
It's JJ. It's really above our pay grade. I want people to have an opportunity to catch a foul ball. Maybe the worst case scenario, there'll be like 14 hands around your hand, and somebody will squeeze the back of your hand, or you'll get a bruise on your finger from the ball. But no line drive should be smacking us in the face like that little girl in split seconds. Did that family think and have any clue that they were going to be in a situation that they could potentially be in an emergency room? Aren't they going to be pissed when they find out they could have been part of a weekly or a biweekly statistic? And if they knew that in advance, would they have brought their little child to the game? I think probably not. What parent would? Most parents just don't think about, protecting their kids at games. And why should they? And baseball's been getting away with this for 50 years. And on my website, I compare them to big tobacco. They're no different. They know the risks. For some reason, the regulatory agencies did not come in and swoop in when they should have, certainly in 1970 when Alan Fish died. But baseball knew that these close calls and this flirting with danger would continue year after year after year. I've interviewed a woman from 1979 who lost her eye. She has no longer one eye. And she, as an adult, was so happy that her child chose not to play baseball. It has long-term effects. People are bitter. They never get apologies. They don't get their medical bills paid for. Baseball can't legitimately apologize because there'll be an admission of guilt. So these people are displaced. These people need to be welcomed back to the game. And this Field of Dreams fantasy from a couple of weeks ago, I also rented another airplane with another message that read Field of Screams. And the reason why I did that is I wanted the people on the ground to say, Field of Dream, look at Field of Screams and go to foulballsafetynow.com. They're portraying a fantasy. These people need to be welcomed back to the game. So how many crushed heads and lost eyes are there over the last 40 years where people are bitter and they don't watch the games anymore and they don't want their children playing baseball anymore or starting to play baseball? You know, like, they need to be welcomed back. They need to be treated with dignity. And if that ever really happened, that means there would be a whole changing of the guard, because the public sentiment would be like, oh, you mean those people knew about it in advance? All those owners and lawyers within baseball knew about this? Yes, all the secrets are still behind the doors at MLB, and they've never seen the light of day. Fortunate that the NBC report came out 2 years ago. The LA Times suggested 4,500 injuries if all the teams participated, all the independent contractors who work at First Aid. And I'm saying 5,000. So we're close on that. And all the other statistics I read off to you before.
Yeah, that's very fascinating because, again, I don't think about those things, but you just mentioned all that, and it brings up a lot of interesting points. And and sometimes you forget about too, not just baseballs. You also have bats flying everywhere, and it can be very dangerous, as you mentioned. And it's very fascinating to see all these points that you're bringing up. But again, before we started recording, we talked more about the baseball season. You talked about you're kind of a fan, and who is actually your favorite team in Major League Baseball?
Yeah. So my favorite team is the New York Mets. I'm from New York. And two things actually grew on me and why this campaign got going. There was an incident when I was with a group of folks about 15, 16, 17 years ago in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Cyclone game in Coney Island, if anyone's been to Coney Island. On Surf Avenue, we're standing outside the ballpark, and the ball comes flying outside, and nobody knows the ball's coming and going to fall on you. And it hit this person we were with in the forearm, and they had a big welt on their forearm. If it hit the person on the head, would that have sent it into a concussion? Maybe. It wasn't a 90-mile-an-hour line drive, but it did leave him with a welt on his forearm, and that kind of stuck with me. And then in 2006, also at Shea Stadium, a big playoff game with the Mets and the Cardinals, and the only ticket I could find was like a few rows from the field, and it cost a lot of money. And I was like, okay, I'll do it, because it was a big playoff game. And I was a few seats away from Jerry Seinfeld, the big celebrity. And at the time, there were no nets over the dugout, similar to the video that's on the website at foulballsafetynow.com, with the video showing the ball going in between the two heads of the guys in the first or second row. And I was in one of those type of seats. And I was nervous for the whole game. And I was like, I don't know how people could do this all the time. I'm nervous right now. So I'm watching the playoff game, and I'm intense on the game, but I'm also like, a ball could be flicked at me in 100 miles an hour, and I'm not going to be able to get out of the way. But whatever. I took in the experience, and it left me with a feeling of like, I wouldn't go sit there again, that kind of thing. I wouldn't be looking for seats in those sections, even if they were given to me for free. So, but I'm a huge New York Met fan. I still have hope, because I'm an ultimate optimist. It might be the worst of it might be the worst division in the National League this year. There's still 7.5 games out with how many games to go, a month and a week. But you win three and the other team loses three, and then you're 4.5 out. So it's all about getting closer to keeping baseball interesting till the end of the year. So I really am a big baseball fan, and I'm not just looking to make trouble. I'm just somebody who's been presented this. I'm trying to make heads or tails over this. It's like I'm not unearthing anything. You can find documentation of injuries. I'm doing research. I'm just trying to put it into context. And it's not just the owners that I'm pissed at. I'm also pissed at the baseball writers and the players and the broadcasters, because certainly the players could have done more. Certainly they were baseball players. They came through the ranks, through the minor leagues. There's no union in the minor leagues. A lot of these players don't make money at all, and they're just trying to be. They're trying to, keep their eye on the prize, which is becoming a major leaguer. Most will not. There's 5,000 minor leaguers or so, and most will not make the major leagues. But they bear the burden. They know that they can name somebody. They tell their own family members. When my book comes out, I'll have quotes from some minor leaguers that say, "No, mom and dad, you cannot sit there. You need to sit behind the nets." But they're not getting on the public address and telling everybody else. There's been baseball players like Nomar Garcia Parra, who was nervous, maybe a little obsessive about it, but maybe he felt like he had to be. Like he would be a third baseman 15, 20 years ago, and he'd go over to the sides and tell mom and dad to switch seats with the kid because the kid would be closer to the home plate area. Not that 3 feet would make a difference, but rather the father take the clunk of the get it with the ball rather than the kid. And he would actually go up and tell people because he knew his families were safe, but everyone else wasn't. And I mean, he could probably have found 100 people to talk to, but he found maybe 1, 2 people a day to do that to. That's pretty an interesting example. And I have quotes from players stacked on top of each other saying they don't allow their families to sit in certain sections. It would be really interesting to get the broadcasters and their sports writers, who are journalists, mind you, to talk about their own feelings. They probably tell the same thing to their own families, but I believe they haven't been properly informing all of us because they don't want to offend the client, which is baseball. And they don't want to get in trouble with their editors at the newspapers. So they feel like it's not their responsibility. But I do believe it is. And I believe they could have band together a long, long time ago and said, listen, we're journalists. We know the frequency of this. Our families know about it, but these poor fans don't. And nobody stepped up. And even Jeff Passan from ESPN and maybe Ken Rosenthal, a couple of guys who said a few things after the little girl got hurt in 2019. Jeff Passan from ESPN, big baseball guy, went on PBS, a PBS show. You guys could check it out. And yeah, he said all the right things. Regulatory agencies, government needs to come in and tell us where the nets need to go, that kind of thing. But, if you only say something for 5 minutes, I'm sorry. You tried, but you should have did more. You're still collecting a big paycheck. You still work in the industry of baseball. And like I said, I believe once the fans really realize that their growing families were sitting ducks in the shooting gallery, if you will, they're going to have their epiphany of outrage. And they'll say, you mean every time we came to the game, we could have been part of a weekly or biweekly statistic? Absolutely. And baseball knew this in advance? Sure they did. And they didn't tell us? Well, the only thing they told you was in microprint, which nobody ever saw. It was on the back of the ticket or the e-ticket. You don't really look at that. But if they ever put that up on the scoreboard and made those letters large, you'd have families asking the question right then and there, why are we sitting here with our growing kids? Or they'd raise more questions. And nobody raises too many questions with microprint, unfortunately. And I still believe that most fans, based on my research in minor league ballparks and stadiums, when I inquired about where the nets were, they would say things like, really, you're the first one asking us about that. So clearly it's not been really conveyed. And these articles and these incidences, there's summaries of one particular incident. It's not that long article. It's not that investigative article that really covers it all. So my book's going to cover it at some point in time, and I think it's hopefully sooner rather than later. I have enough for a book. I don't have a large audience yet to share it with. So in the meanwhile, my door is open at foulballsafetynow.com to hear your story, whether it was 50 years ago or 20 years ago. Tell us your story, on or off the record. I'm easygoing. I have somebody who will help us with the interview. Just reach out and say hi. If you want to share a story, or if somebody wants to talk to me, you could go to the foulballsafetynow.com website, and you can check me out on the Facebooks and the Twitters. We're putting new things up. But yeah, certainly have any questions, JJ, about what I just shared, I'm happy to keep it going.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks again. And again, all of his description, his website, and or the website will be all in the description down below. And of course, you mentioned you're a Mets fan, and you mentioned that was really cool that you went to a playoff game back in 2006 when the Mets were a lot better than they are now. But and before we were very close to ending the interview, and again, I can't thank you so much for coming on, Jordan. But if the Mets don't make the playoffs this season, what do you think they need to do in free agency and in the offseason to get what they to finally make that playoff run? Because they have the talented roster. I mean, they have Jacob deGrom, the best pitcher in the league, but it looks like he's done for the season. What do you think the Mets need to do in free agency for next season to get back in the postseason?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm not a general manager. I'm ultimately an optimist. I like the guys that come through the system, and and hopefully, they come up through the system and they turn out they're going to be 10, 15-year guys with the team. But the Mets sometimes are guilty of using that as their, oh, well, what they did last year was good and it's promising, and we want to keep with those guys like Jeff McNeil, Dominic Smith, but they don't have that many years of major league experience. And yes, they signed Francisco Lindor, and he was the guy, and I don't know if it's going to work for him in New York. He was injured last month or so, but before that, he wasn't having a Francisco Lindor kind of year, and they locked in for a long time. They have a new owner. Apparently, they're willing to spend some money to try to keep up with the Yankees, but the Yankees keep getting reinforcements. When you think they're down and out 3 weeks ago, boom, they win like 10 in a row, 12 in a row, and they're like, the Yankees are the Yankees and the Mets are the Mets. But I'm a Met fan, and maybe there'll be some more spending at the end of the year, and maybe they'll go with more, certain veterans rather than promising up and coming major leaguers that don't have the years under their belt. You may not be able to rely on those guys if they don't have all those games under their belt. I don't know if Jeff McNeil is going to stay as a productive hitter, and I don't know if Dominic Smith is going to be an everyday player, and J.D. Davis and a few other guys. But I appreciate you bringing that up. Just a huge Met fan. Let's see what happens in the next 2 weeks. The Mets are playing all the bottom teams in the next 15 days. Maybe they'll go 11-4, 12-3, and shock me. But I'll keep tuning in. I'll keep paying attention. But this issue is huge. At the website, again, go to foulballsafetynow.com and sign these 2 petitions about the Nets and about repealing the baseball rule, because those will all lead to baseball being forced to make the Nets happen, and people won't be in harm's way. And I'm just going to remain a big baseball fan. I'm just going to remain a huge advocate, to this issue. And, guys like Gerwin Goldblum, who lost his wife, Linda, he's talked to me time after time on some of these virtual press conferences, and it's been really interesting. And I have a handful of victims that keep coming back and feel like they want to convey this important message to you guys. So it was really a pleasure, JJ.
But before, again, we end the interview, and again, guys, don't forget to check out his website, foulballsafetynow.com. Again, I'll put all the links links in the description down below. But do you have a World Series prediction?
I don't have any predictions. I'm just watching games and from time to time, and and I don't really know. We'll see how it goes. You're probably more informed on that, and I am, but I don't have a prediction right now. I'll still tune in and day to day and keep track on what the Mets is doing, and maybe in a couple of weeks I'll start paying more attention to it. But I really appreciate the time, JJ. This has really been good.
Yeah, no problem. Again, go check out his website at foulballsafetynow.com. He also is going to be writing a book here soon. So again, thanks for coming. I'll put all the links in the description down below. Also have all your social media like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. And again, yeah, thanks for coming on, Jordan. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks again.